Hello and welcome to A Baker's Passion. I'm Ray Madursky, and today I'm going to guide you through the steps of making English hot cross buns. These are a traditional yeast dough that has been sweetened and enriched with butter and eggs, and it was traditionally baked on Fridays during Lent in England. And the English used to believe that if the buns were baked on Good Friday, they held special magical powers. What the English tend to do is add some dried fruits and things to the dough. They sweeten it, but also they add some interesting spices. Some recipes that I've researched have only allspice, but what we're going to do is use a combination of cinnamon, cardamom, nutmeg, just a little kiss of allspice. And I think you'll really enjoy this. So why don't we get started? Okay, so what we're going to do first is prepare the pre-ferment. I tend to use and prepare my pre-ferments in the style of the pouliche. So what we're going to do is put part of the yeast that's in the recipe into a mixture of dried milk, water, and then we're going to have some honey and malted barley syrup. The malted barley syrup is important because it has a little bit of an enzyme that helps the sugars in the recipe break down into their monosaccharide components, and those are what the yeast needs to be able to metabolize. So I've weighed the water, put it into the weighed dry milk. I'm going to put in the barley syrup. And then our honey. The honey, the amount in the recipe is 1 tablespoon. I just kind of go by eye, and you're really okay doing that, so don't be afraid. Now I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of instant yeast. Now if you're using instant yeast that's in an envelope, I would still measure about a teaspoon, and it's going to be a little bit less than half of a packet if you're using envelopes. And now we're going to let it rest for about 15 minutes to allow the yeast to be able to activate. They become moist, they activate, and they begin to metabolize on the sugar. The yeast has been proofing for about 15 minutes, and now I'm going to add the flour component, and I'm just going to stir it into the liquid. This is actually 2.5 ounces, 2.5 ounces of bread flour. So that's all ready. Now what I'm going to do is put a lid on it, and this will grow for 2, maybe 3 hours. So we'll watch it grow, and then I'll show you when it's ready. Okay, so the pouliche, or the pre-ferment, has been growing for 2 hours. Lots of fine bubbles, and it's about quadrupled in volume. So now this plus the egg gets put into the bowl with the dry ingredients, and then we're going to use the paddle attachment just to get everything mixed well. So this is 1 egg yolk. Okay. And all of the polish goes into the bowl with the dry ingredients. Okay, now with the paddle, just until everything comes together on the lowest speed. Okay, that's all we need to do. The dough is very coarse, but we're now going to use the dough attachment and knead the dough. Okay, now I'm going to add the fruit that has been macerating in just some water overnight. I put a tablespoon of dark brandy in with the water. I'm placing the dough hook on, and we'll knead the dough for about 10 or 15 minutes until it begins to really develop, and then we'll add the butter. It's better to add the butter after the dough has had some period of kneading. What I'm going to do now is demonstrate the proper technique for kneading the dough by hand, because many people will want to do it that way. I actually knead my breads when I make them, all my different sourdough breads, by hand, simply because I enjoy doing it and I think it's a good exercise. So what I'm doing, pushing with the heel of the hand, bringing back, turning a quarter of a turn, and keeping my surface lightly floured. It doesn't have to be too well floured. As your work surface gets a little tacky, sticky, you want to do is scrape it, get a little more flour down there. This does tend to be a pretty sticky dough, and we haven't even gotten the butter into it yet. So this is you want to reach the same end point, and actually that end point is kind of a physical chemistry game. We want to activate the gluten so that it will build these wonderful networks within the dough and strengthen and give structure to our final bread. And even though we're calling them hot cross buns, they're still really an enriched bread. So I'm going to continue to knead until the dough gets to where it needs to be. And actually, I think we're actually about there. So what I'm going to do now is begin to add the butter. All different ways to do this, and many people will tell you different things. I like getting some structure in my dough before I start to put the butter into it, because I think the butter does better and the dough does better if we do it this way. Once again, things are going to get pretty sticky, and it's actually 4 ounces of butter that are added to the dough. So just kind of gently knead it in, do the work as though you were kneading the dough, and get that butter in it, and it'll get dispersed on its own. So just keep kneading. And the dough will be sticky now again, but that's what it should be. This actually is a really wonderful soft dough, and we want to keep it working until the gluten has really been activated. We know that the bread will be a good structured. Bread when we form the actual bun. So I'm going to continue kneading, and when we're ready I'll show you how to test for doneness. Well, I'm finishing up the kneading. The doughs come together beautifully. Enriched doughs that have a lot of butter and eggs and sugar and that kind of thing, and this also has milk, they don't get quite as smooth as lean doughs, white bread dough or rye bread dough. So we won't get to quite that place, but this is what your dough should look like. Now what I'm going to do is place the dough in a bowl that's been oiled. So I'll twirl it in the bottom where there's a little bit of oil, turn it over. Now the bowl will get covered and sit in a warm place until it has grown to about 2.5 times its size.